A moving tribute by the girlfriend of one of the young men who died in the Shoreham air crash. She leaves flowers at the scene for her footballing boyfriend as the painstaking search for clues continues. Police now believe 11 people died in the crash.
Also tonight, a former Tory MP denies child abuse allegations and says they have wrecked his life.
More stock market turmoil in China, but shares in the West recover from Black Monday.
And Greg Rutherford leaps to greatness, adding world gold to his Olympic, European and Commonwealth haul.
This is ITV News at 6:30 with Mary Nightingale and Alistair Stewart.
Good evening. As the painstaking recovery effort continues in Shoreham, the family of one of the victims of Saturday's air crash have paid tribute to their son, calling him a kind, loyal and exceptional young man. 23-year-old Jacob Schilt was an amateur footballer who died alongside a friend as they travelled to a match.
His girlfriend called him the love of her life and talked about the marriage and children that will never happen now. Neil Connery has the latest from Shoreham.
In Shoreham's silence, flowers for those who never came home on Saturday. Hundreds of tributes line the footbridge next to the crash site. Some of the police officers dealing with this disaster paying respects, along with a never-ending stream of support from a community in deep shock. Today, the parents of one of the victims, Jacob Schilt, said Jacob was a generous, kind, loyal and exceptional young man. He loved his family and friends, and he loved living life to the full. Megan, his girlfriend, has been robbed of the life and future they were planning together. Amid the flowers, a photo of the couple and a card from his girlfriend. Megan wrote, "I am sure that we would have grown up, got married, had babies and lived in Brighton." Jacob was on his way to play for Worthing United along with his friend Matthew Grimstone when they lost their lives.
My young grandson plays for Worthing Football and he didn't go that Saturday. He worked at Tesco's for the day. Otherwise he would have been there exactly at 1:20 like the other two boys. And I just thank my lucky stars somebody was looking after him. I feel so sorry for him. I'm sorry, I can't.
No, I am. So far, 4 victims from Saturday's air crash have been named.
It is now 11 people that we are classifying as highly likely to have been victims of the air crash, and it's becoming increasingly likely that that will be the final figure. We have to urge some caution though, because we haven't completed our full forensic examination of the crash site.
Forensic teams in white protective suits still scour the scene for evidence. Some of the aircraft's wreckage has been taken to Farnborough, where investigators are piecing together what happened. With every passing hour, more flowers. In the bleakness, splashes of colour and words of love and support. And still, the silence. Well, the atrocious weather we've had down here today has slowed down the investigators and the police forensic teams that work just a few hundred yards from where I am. They know how important the job they're doing is right now as they do what they have to do. The people of Shoreham are doing everything they can to reach out and help those affected by this tragedy.
Neil Connery in Shoreham, thank you.
A former Tory MP has dismissed as ludicrous claims that he was involved in the sexual abuse and even the murder of children. Former Billericay MP Harvey Proctor insisted today that he is completely innocent after he was questioned for a second time by detectives investigating an alleged Westminster abuse ring. Juliette Bremner reports.
Nearly 30 years after Harvey Proctor stood down as an MP, he today walked back into the media limelight. He wanted to denounce his treatment at the hands of the police and journalists investigating historical allegations of child sex abuse, all of which he denies.
They amount to just about the worst allegations anyone can make against another person, including, as they do, multiple murder of children, their torture, grievous bodily harm, rape and sexual child abuse.
He's been interviewed twice about an alleged VIP paedophile ring centred on Dolphin Square, close to Westminster. His home in the grounds of Belvoir Castle was searched after a man referred to as Nick named him as one of the gang who'd abused him. The former Conservative peer Leon Britton's name was linked to him as part of the gang, as was Edward Heath, the former Prime Minister, an idea he ridiculed, claiming they'd been political enemies.
It is so far-fetched as to be unbelievable. My situation has transformed from Kafkaesque bewilderment to black farce incredulity.
In 1987, he pleaded guilty to gross indecency involving underage male prostitutes. But Mr. Proctor insists the current police investigation is a homosexual witch hunt, in which officers have allowed an anonymous victim to make uncorroborated allegations.
I don't want to make it personal about Harvey Proctor, but in the history of these kinds of crimes, I've yet to encounter anybody who's come forward and said, I'm guilty of these crimes.
Mr. Proctor claims this is an abuse of his human rights. He's now urging the police to prosecute or drop the allegations. Juliet Bremner, ITV News.
China cut its main interest rate today in an attempt to halt a massive stock market collapse that's already had repercussions around the world. Fears over slowing growth in the world's second largest economy came to a head yesterday with panic selling, which continued unabated today. Our China correspondent Lucy Watson has more.
China is flashing economic warning signs. Its double-digit growth is over, its economy is faltering, and stocks continue to dive. Down by nearly 8% today after falling 8.5% yesterday, the largest drop in 8 years. And today, China's central bank cut interest rates again to try and help. Because 80% of Chinese investors are ordinary people like Feng Li, who lost £10,000 2 days ago. I have no tears left, she says. I wanted to expand our restaurant, but now I can't because I've lost my savings. The market feels like it's at rock bottom, so the government needs to help us.
China's markets have lost around £3.5 trillion in value since the peak in June. To put that into context, the UK's annual GDP last year was £1.8 trillion. As they continue to fall, it means investors are fast losing confidence in their government.
The fear being that China's downward spiral continues, affecting global growth.
I think the market has just totally lost faith in the government's ability to implement economic policy to support growth, implement those sort of policies to support economic reform, and give investors any sort of reason to sort of buy the market at this point.
For the past decade, China's been the engine of the world's economy, but it's now stuttering. And with markets in freefall, the bad days just keep on coming. Lucy Watson, ITV News, Beijing.
Well, as Lucy said, Chinese markets have continued to fall, but here the FTSE recovered much of yesterday's losses, and our economics editor Richard Edgar is with me. Does that mean that we are now safe?
Well, the immediate concern has abated. It wasn't just the FTSE 100 that made up those losses from yesterday, and it all accelerated as news of the interest rate cut in China filtered through. Here in London, the main index of shares closed up 3% at 6,081. In cash terms, you may remember that £74 billion were wiped off the value of shares yesterday. Well, the 3% rise today adds back £47 billion, so almost two-thirds of what was lost. And American markets are up significantly at the moment as well. There's a wave of relief. But our own Chancellor, George Osborne, has warned that we're not out of the woods yet. Perhaps the market chaos has eased back, but we're still exposed.
The question you've got to ask is, what's this telling us about the global economy? And it's telling us that there are a lot of risks out there and there are concerns about China. Now, here in Britain, we can't be immune from that. We're connected with the rest of the world. But we've done hard work over recent years to put our own house in order and to better protect ourselves from these kinds of things that can hit us from abroad.
Now, if all of this is a bit too gloomy for an August evening, there is some good news for British borrowers. Or this renewed uncertainty about China and the depressing effect it may have on economies around the world means that the Bank of England may push back when it wants to put up that fabled first interest rate hike. Investors have said that they expect it now to happen instead of early next year, about this time next year.
OK, Richard, thank you very much.
The Foreign Office has confirmed that 4 British nationals were among 6 people killed when a sightseeing plane crashed in Canada. They died when their seaplane came down in Woodland in Quebec province on Sunday. The identities of the British victims have not been released.
Here, the Labour Party has banned more than 3,000 people from voting in its leadership election, branding them cheats who don't support the party's values. 400 of those were identified as Conservative supporters.
More than 50,000 others have also been taken off the list as they weren't on the electoral roll. But, as our political correspondent Libby Vina reports, the candidates were still insisting the contest was fair.
The numbers involved are huge, which is wonderful. I think it's the biggest ever exercise in party democracy ever in Britain's history.
What we want is to have as many people as possible involved in this election.
Well, this is a great celebration, actually, for the Labour Party, that we've got this level of interest in our leadership.
Level of interest, yes, but how much of it is genuine? Well, not all, we learnt today. About 10% of the votes have been discounted. The candidates weren't so keen to discuss that, after this radio hustings disappearing to a nearby business park for crisis talks, away from the media, although that plan soon unravelled. A sense of panic appears to have gripped the Labour Party, with all 4 contenders sworn to secrecy about their meeting here in Stevenage with Harriet Harman to discuss how far infiltrators have hijacked the leadership race. What's worrying them are people like Martin Williams, a Tory voter who signed up to vote for Jeremy Corbyn.
It appealed to my mischievous side when I realised I could vote in the election, and, you know, I think Jeremy Corbyn is the most unelectable, so I voted for him.
611,000 people initially registered to vote in the Labour leadership contest, of which 554,000 have now been found to be eligible. That's a fall of 57,000. Most ruled out because they weren't on the electoral register or had submitted 2 votes. But Labour have confirmed they did find 3,148 infiltrators, 400 of them Conservative Party members and 1,900 from the Green Party. When she eventually emerged, the acting leader urged those not entitled to vote to stay away.
It's not funny or clever for people from other parties to try and cheat their way into our system, and we will do everything we can to make sure that all those people who are entitled to a vote do get a vote, but those who are not entitled to vote because they support another party, they can't help choose our leader.
The unanswered question, is the front runner still in front, with so many votes now discounted?
Thanks. OK.
Libby Vina, ITV News, Stevenage.
Still to come.
Rutherford takes gold here in the Bird's Nest.
Jumping for joy, Rutherford proves they point with gold at the World Championships.
Every time I win something, somebody tells me that I didn't win it well enough. So I think jumping 8.41 in a major final, I think that's winning well enough.
And in the frame, the 12-year-old boy's costly trip to a museum. Find out more, along with the rest of the day's news, after the break.
Welcome back. Tributes are being paid tonight to the British racing driver Justin Wilson, who has died of injuries he suffered in a crash in America on Sunday. The Formula One driver Jenson Button remembered his infectious smile when they raced go-karts together in their youth. And Wilson's family in Yorkshire say they have lost a fantastic father, son and brother. Damon Green reports.
He was doing the job he loved, competing in the sport that was his passion, and that is how Justin Wilson lost his life. A crash on the track in Pennsylvania just ahead of the British driver, a piece of debris flying through the air and into his cockpit. He lived for 2 days before succumbing to his injuries. They were injuries his family told me he might easily have escaped.
You could say a third of a second either way and it would have missed him.
but that's the risk of motorsport, which we all know, but you just never think it would happen to Justin.
Justin was a star of the US IndyCar circuit, and at the family home near Sheffield there's a whole room filled with the memories of a life in motor racing, a life that started long ago as a boy in karting.
Jason Button.
His then rival, a future world champion, paid his respects on Twitter today. I raced with Justin as far back as 1989 in karting and remember his smile was infectious. Such a lovely guy.
I hope so.
But other rivals who never hit those heights still miss him just as much.
What we actually saw was somebody who we knew achieved something great, but did it with absolute honesty and integrity. And obviously when something like this happens, yeah, you know, everybody unites. It's just terrible, absolutely terrible.
From karting to Formula One to IndyCar, Justin Wilson did what so many dreamed of, and his family say it was the life he chose.
He was just a nice, kind, warm-hearted person, and he, as they're calling him, the gentle giant. He was a true gentleman.
A fierce competitor and a friend. Those who knew him won't forget. Damon Green, ITV News in South Yorkshire.
A British man held hostage in Yemen for 18 months has said he is delighted and relieved to be home. 64-year-old Bob Semple said he was incredibly grateful to all those who had supported his family and to United Arab Emirates forces who freed him.
And the so-called Islamic State has published images of the destruction of the Temple of Baal Shamin among the ancient ruins of Palmyra in Syria. The UN's cultural organisation said the deliberate destruction of Syria's cultural heritage was a war crime.
British long jumper Greg Rutherford has joined an elite group who've held all 4 major athletics championships simultaneously after winning the world title today.
He won that gold in Beijing with a jump to spare, and after previous rows within the sport, says that he now deserves even more respect. Here's our sports correspondent, Ian Payne.
Rutherford takes gold here in the bird's nest.
By winning gold this afternoon, Greg Rutherford has achieved athletics Grand Slam. He now holds the World, Olympic, European and Commonwealth titles simultaneously. Rutherford jumped 8 metres and 41 centimetres.
Oh, that's big! That's a huge jump!
His second longest jump ever. His timing was perfect and his joy unshackled. He'd been helped earlier when the only man who'd leapt further than him this year, the American Jeff Henderson, had a disastrous competition.
Oh, it's another foul, though.
Registering only 1 legitimate jump at not even 8 metres, and he just couldn't believe it. It's been an emotional period for the Briton. Often outspoken, he was ridiculed on social media for being lucky after winning gold at London 2012. He claimed he didn't get the respect given to Britain's other 2 gold medal winners on Super Saturday, Mo Farah and Jessica Ennis-Hill.
Every time I win something, somebody tells me that I didn't win it well enough. So I think jumping 8.41 in a major final, I think that's winning well enough, to be totally honest. And every single jumper who was the best jumpers in the world were here at this major championships. And I managed to come away with the gold medal again. So I'm hoping nobody has anything to say negative about it, to be honest, because I don't think I could cope.
He's also fallen out with UK athletics after they wouldn't fund him, and more recently for criticising the decision not to have a Union flag on the British team vest. And he made the point again when he was thrown a Union flag waistcoat to celebrate in. He is, though, undoubtedly now one of Britain's greatest ever athletes. Ian Payne, ITV News.
And finally, it was an expensive trip which punched a hole in a £1 million oil painting. CCTV captured the moment a 12-year-old boy at an art gallery in Taiwan tripped over while walking past a 350-year-old painting and smashed his hand through the canvas. He looks stunned after realising what he's done.
As well he might. The work, called Flowers by the Italian master Paolo Porpora, underwent emergency surgery and was put back on display. It will undergo more extensive restoration next week. The boy's relieved family will not have to pay for the repair, as the gallery was, we're told, understanding, and the painting was insured. Before we go, a reminder that you can get ITV News whenever you want with our app. From the latest news to the most popular stories, you can follow developments as they happen.
There's also the main national and international news, plus the stories where you live. And all of it is shareable across social media. You can download the app for free from your phone's app store right now.
And that's all for now. We'll both be back for the ITV News at 10.
But from the two of us and the rest of the team, a very good evening to you.
Good evening. Bye-bye.